What if the NFL's biggest names weren't just heroes on the field? What if the fame, glory, and pressure of the league hid something far darker, something no one could have imagined? From linebacker Jovan Belcher ending his career after a murder-suicide, to Dwayne Goodrich making a decision that cost innocent lives, some of the NFL's biggest names have a much more evil side to them. Was it the toll of the game, the mental strain, or is there something wrong deep in the NFL that the league doesn't want you to know? Today, we're going to find out how some of these players went from icons to criminals. Jovan Belcher, the star that burned out too quickly. Jovan Belcher was a name that fans were starting to recognize in the NFL. He was a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, known for his speed, toughness, and hard-hitting style. He had everything going for him, and he seemed destined for a long, successful career, but everything changed in an instant. Everything fell apart for Belcher on December 1st, 2012, when he took his girlfriend's life at their house and drove to the Chiefs' practice facility and took his own life after confronting team officials. It was a tragic and senseless act that left everyone asking, what happened to Jovan Belcher? At the time, Belcher was a rising star. He was born in West Babylon, New York, and made a name for himself at the University of Maine before joining the Chiefs in 2009. Belcher wasn't drafted, but he earned his place on the team quickly because he caught their eye with his aggressive tackling skills and leadership. He was a linebacker who could make big plays and lead the charge. Everything was in place for him to have a long career, but things weren't so easy behind the scenes. Belcher's personal life was starting to fall apart in the months before the tragedy. Reports suggested that he and Perkins had problems in their relationship. They had a baby together, but things weren't going well. Friends and family said Belcher had become withdrawn and seemed to be struggling emotionally. No one knew just how much pressure he was under. After the tragic event, people began to wonder what drove Belcher to snap like that. He had so much going for him. Some suggested that his mental health might have played a role, and just days before the murder-suicide, his coaches noticed that Belcher seemed off, distracted, not himself. It may as well be because of the hits, the concussions, and the constant contact that's demanded by the sport. Many NFL players face mental health struggles later in life, and CTE has been linked to depression and mood changes. Could the head injuries Belcher had suffered during his career have affected his behavior? After everything that's happened with players like Aaron Hernandez, it's hard not to think that head trauma played a role. In the wake of Belcher's death, many wondered if anything could have been done to help him, or if the NFL could have stepped in sooner. But the answer isn't easy. While Jovan Belcher's tragic end raised questions about mental health and the pressures on athletes, it's important to remember that reckless decisions off the field can have fatal consequences. Just look at Dwayne Goodrich, whose actions also left 2 lives lost, but for entirely different reasons. Dwayne Goodrich, a life taken in a moment of recklessness. Dwayne Goodrich was a player with a lot of promise. He was a cornerback for the Dallas Cowboys and was known for his quickness, his athleticism, and his ability to cover wide receivers. Goodrich had all the tools to make it far in the NFL, but in 2003, one reckless decision would change everything, ending his career and taking the lives of 2 people. In the early hours of January 17, 2003, Goodrich was speeding down a highway in Dallas when he lost control of his vehicle and hit 2 pedestrians who were walking on the side of the road. The crash killed both victims instantly, but what made the situation even worse was that Goodrich didn't stop to help. Instead, he fled the scene, leaving the 2 victims behind. It wasn't until later, when he was arrested, that the full scope of his actions became clear. At the time of the incident, Goodrich was in the prime of his career. After being drafted by the Cowboys in 2000, he became a key part of their defense because he could read plays like a book and had an incredible pace. He had a lot to look forward to, but his life and career came crashing down in a split second. The car accident would be the turning point that ended it all. Goodrich was driving recklessly, speeding at 70 miles per hour in a 55 mph zone, and after he hit the pedestrians, he didn't even attempt to help or even check if they were alive. He simply fled the scene of the crime. It wasn't until he was caught by police that the full extent of his actions came to light. Dwayne Goodrich's gray BMW collided with 3 men who were attempting to rescue an unconscious man from a burning car involved in a separate accident on Interstate 35 in Dallas. 2 of the men didn't survive, but 1 sustained a broken leg. Goodrich was convicted of criminally negligent homicide with a deadly weapon and received a sentence of 7.5 years in prison. He was also given an additional 5 years for failing to stop and provide assistance at the scene. His decision to flee the scene only added to the severity of the charges. The reckless actions that led to the deaths of 2 people weren't just a personal tragedy for Goodrich. They were a loss for the victims' families, and it ended a promising promising NFL career. The big question that followed the tragedy was what led Goodrich to make such a reckless decision. Was it simply a moment of poor judgment, or were there other factors at play? NFL players have a lot of pressure on their shoulders, so it's easy to forget the toll it takes on them. It's possible that the weight of this pressure and personal struggles contributed to his poor decision that night. It wasn't until October 2011 that Goodrich was granted parole and released from the Huntsville unit of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Even though Goodrich's case was tragic in and of itself, Philip Adams' case, the destruction brought on by head trauma, is a different matter. Adams would go on to commit a horrific act that raised new concerns about the long-term consequences of playing football. Philip Adams, a tragic end fueled by CTE. Philip Adams was a former NFL cornerback who played for teams like the San Francisco 49ers. On the surface, his career seemed like it could have had a longer run, but his name became linked to one of the most horrific tragedies in sports history. Adams went from being a professional athlete to a killer, ending the lives of 6 people, including 2 young children, before taking his own life. This was shocking to NFL fans, but what doctors discovered afterward was far more disturbing. Adams had a relatively quiet career in the NFL, playing for several teams, including the 49ers, Patriots, Seattle Seahawks, and Oakland Raiders. His career in the league lasted just a few years, from 2010 to 2015. Although Adams showed potential in his football career, he didn't make a huge impact on the field. After retiring, he struggled with personal issues that seemed to play a role in the tragedy that followed. On April 7, 2021, Adams shot and killed Dr. Robert Leslie, his wife, their 2 young grandchildren, aged 5 and 9, and 2 HVAC technicians working on the property. After the murders, Adams fled the scene, and later he took his own life during a standoff with police. The brutality of the crime shocked the community, leaving many to wonder how someone who once played professional football could commit such a devastating act. As investigators began to piece together the details of that night, they discovered he had stage 2 CTE through a posthumous examination of his brain, a condition linked to repeated concussions and head trauma. CTE has been found in numerous former NFL players, and its symptoms include violent mood swings, memory loss, aggression, and suicidal tendencies. Adams's diagnosis of CTE gave the public a glimpse into the possible cause behind his horrific actions. The condition is often only diagnosed after death, and it might have played a role in his behavior leading up to the murders. But what happens when an NFL player's career is cut short, not by injury, but by something as avoidable as driving under the influence? Let's take a look at Josh Brent's story next. Josh Brent, a tragic mistake that cost a life. Josh Brent was a defensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys, known for his strength and ability to dominate offensive lines. He had a bright future in the NFL, but everything changed with one tragic decision. In 2012, Brent caused a drunk driving accident that killed his teammate Jerry Brown. This incident not only exposed Brent's reckless actions, but also brought attention to the larger issue of substance abuse in the NFL. On December 8, 2012, Brent was driving while intoxicated when he lost control of his vehicle and crashed. His passenger, Jerry Brown, a linebacker for the Cowboys, tragically died in the accident. Brent was arrested and charged with intoxication manslaughter after his blood alcohol level was found to be more than twice the legal limit. The accident destroyed Brent's career and ended Brown's life, leaving a lasting impact on both men's futures. At the time of the crash, Brent was only 24 years old, with a bright future ahead of him. As a key part of the Dallas Cowboys' defense, he was known for his strength and leadership, but everything changed after the accident. Brent was sentenced to 180 days in jail, a punishment much lighter than what he could have received. He was also given 10 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution to Brown's family. The decision to hand him such a short sentence sparked controversy, as many felt it didn't reflect the seriousness of the crime. Substance abuse has been a problem in the NFL for a long time, with many players using alcohol and drugs to cope with the intense physical and emotional stress of the game. But it wasn't the first time a famous athlete got involved in a tragic incident. OJ Simpson's story, both in and out of the courtroom, would change how the public saw fame, criminal trials, and sports forever. OJ Simpson, a fallen icon. OJ Simpson is one of the most famous and controversial figures in American history. Once an iconic running back for the Buffalo Bills and later a Hollywood celebrity, Simpson seemed to have it all. His electrifying career in football, highlighted by a Heisman Trophy in 1968 and a place in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, earned him fame that extended far beyond the field. But in 1994, Simpson's life took a wrong turn, and his name became tied to one of the most infamous criminal cases in history. On June 12, 1994, Simpson's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered outside Brown's Los Angeles home. The murder was so violent that it shocked the entire nation. Simpson was considered a prime suspect immediately, and it wasn't because of his history with Brown, but due to the evidence found at the scene, including a bloody glove that seemed to match one Simpson had worn. But Simpson's defense team did a great job with a highly publicized trial despite all the evidence, claiming that the case was a result of police misconduct and racism. The case is considered to be the trial of the century, and for good reason. The courtroom drama, Simpson's status at the time, and the focus on race and police corruption worked in his favor. After a long, brutal, and highly publicized trial, Simpson was eventually acquitted of the murders in October 1995. The verdict was shocking because the evidence against him seemed overwhelming, but the public opinion was divided. Some believed he was innocent, while others were convinced of his guilt. However, despite the acquittal in the criminal trial, Simpson's legal trouble didn't end. In 1997, a civil court found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages to the victims' families. The civil trial focused on different standards of proof than the criminal case, and the jury found that Simpson was indeed responsible for the deaths, even though he had been acquitted of the criminal charges. This was the final nail in the coffin for Simpson, from being a famous football star and TV personality to becoming the center of one of the most infamous criminal trials in history. Simpson has lived a complicated life ever since. In 2007, he was arrested for an armed robbery and kidnapping in Las Vegas, for which he was convicted in 2008. He served 9 years in prison and was released on parole in 2017. But what about the lesser-known players whose stories were equally shocking? Eric Naposki is a prime example. Eric Naposki, a life of football, love, and homicide. Eric Naposki was a former NFL player who played for the New England Patriots and Indianapolis Colts before eventually moving to Europe. Naposki's football career was not as famous as OJ Simpson's, but his involvement in the 1994 murder of millionaire Bill McLaughlin was. The murder, which also involved Naposki's girlfriend Nanette Johnston, led to one of the most bizarre events in the NFL. Naposki's story starts like many others in the NFL. After being drafted by the Patriots in 1989, he played as a linebacker for both the Patriots and Colts as a promising player. He wasn't star player material, but he was solid on the field. After his short career in the NFL, Naposki moved to Europe, where he continued to play football for the Barcelona Dragons in the World League of American Football. But while his football career was winding down, Naposki was about to find himself involved in a much darker chapter of his life. In December 1994, Bill McLaughlin, a wealthy businessman from California, was found murdered in his Newport Beach home. He had been shot multiple times, and the crime scene was horrific. At first, investigators didn't make much headway, but it didn't take long before they discovered a connection to Eric Naposki. It turned out that McLaughlin's girlfriend, Nanette Johnston, was having an affair with Naposki, raising suspicions of a conspiracy. To make matters worse, Naposki and Johnston had been living together in McLaughlin's beach house. Investigators soon found that Johnston had taken out a life insurance policy on McLaughlin, naming herself as the beneficiary. They also discovered she had forged his signature on several checks. The motive became clear: financial gain. It seemed Naposki and Johnston had planned McLaughlin's murder together to steal his money. After the murder, Naposki and Johnston tried to cover their tracks, but cracks in their alibis began to show. Naposki initially denied any involvement in the crime, but as the investigation progressed, he became a primary suspect. A critical breakthrough came when a notebook found in Naposki's car contained McLaughlin's license plate number, further tying him to the scene. Eventually, both Naposki and Johnston were arrested. Despite the evidence against him, Naposki maintained his innocence throughout the trial. His defense argued that he had been framed, but the jury ultimately found him guilty of first-degree murder in 2011, nearly 17 years after the crime. Naposki was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His former girlfriend, Nanette Johnston, was also convicted for her role in the murder and received a 25-year sentence for manslaughter. While Naposki maintains his innocence to this day, the evidence against him has kept him behind bars. And while his involvement in the murder is one kind of tragedy, Tommy Kane's story is a reminder that sometimes domestic violence off the field leads to irreversible consequences. Tommy Kane, a career and life destroyed by domestic violence. Tommy Kane was a wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, known for his speed and athleticism, which made him a promising player in the NFL. After an impressive college career at Syracuse, Kane was drafted by the Seahawks in 1988. He showed potential with his ability to make significant catches and gain yards after the reception. Over 5 seasons in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Kane played in 54 games with the team, demonstrating his explosive speed and making a name for himself as a reliable offensive player. However, in 2003, Kane's life took a tragic turn. He killed his estranged wife, Tamara Shaikh, during a domestic dispute, which ended his career and shattered his life. This incident occurred outside the football field, and the violence of that moment overshadowed Kane's promising future in the NFL. Tommy Kane's life off the field was much less stable. In 2003, his marriage to Tamara Shaikh was facing serious problems. The couple had been dealing with tension in their relationship, and things got worse as they tried to manage personal issues. Kane had been struggling with depression, and in the weeks leading up to the tragic event, was reportedly talking about suicide. On November 23, 2003, Kane and Shaikh had a violent argument at his mother's house in La Salle, Quebec. The argument escalated quickly into physical violence, and in a moment of rage, Kane grabbed Shaikh by the hair, dragged her into the kitchen, and stabbed her in the neck. Tommy Kane has been behind bars ever since he took his wife's life 2 decades ago for violating the conditions of his release as he continues to serve his sentence. Kane had a chance to get out for a brief time in November 2016, but after refusing to take a urine test and admitting to using cocaine, it violated the terms of his statutory release. The conditions of his release included staying drug-free, avoiding alcohol, and participating in psychological counseling, but more on that later. His drug abuse had been linked to the violence that led to Shaikh's death in 2003. Kane severely beat Shaikh and stabbed her in a fit of rage. Initially charged with second-degree murder, Kane pled guilty to manslaughter in 2004. He was granted day parole in 2015, but did not receive full parole before reaching his statutory release date a year later, as federal law automatically grants release to offenders at 2/3 of their sentence, provided they were not granted full parole earlier. In May, Kane was permitted to travel to the US for testing related to the NFL's concussion settlement program, which compensates former players who suffered long-term effects from concussions. The emotional strain from the medical testing, combined with personal events like the death of his sister, contributed to Kane's decision to use cocaine. His parole officer requested a urine test, which Kane initially agreed to, but later refused, admitting to cocaine use after the fact. Police arrested him after he failed to comply. Following the incident, the Parole Board of Canada decided to lift the suspension of his release and instead reprimanded him. They ordered him to participate in a residential substance abuse treatment program to help him develop a new self-management plan. After completing the treatment, Kane will be moved closer to his family to assist in his reintegration. Tommy Kane's story is heartbreaking, but it's not the only example of violence within the NFL. Despite being a Hall of Famer, Ray Lewis was involved in a violent brawl in 2000 where 2 men lost their lives. Ray Lewis, a Hall of Fame career ended by controversy. Ray Lewis is regarded as one of the greatest linebackers in NFL history, a Hall of Fame player and the heart and soul of the Baltimore Ravens defense. Lewis was known for his leadership, intensity, and ability to control the field. His career spanned 17 seasons filled with achievements, including 2 Super Bowl titles and a Super Bowl MVP award. However, despite his success on the field, his legacy has always been shadowed by his involvement in a deadly incident. On January 31, 2000, after the Ravens' Super Bowl victory, Lewis was involved in a brawl outside an Atlanta nightclub that left 2 men, Richard Lawler and Jacinth Baker, fatally stabbed. Lewis and 2 of his friends were arrested and charged with murder. The case immediately caught the attention of the public due to Lewis's fame, as he was considered the star player of the Ravens, and the violence that unfolded raised questions about his role in the incident. Initially, it appeared that Lewis might be linked directly to the crime, especially after it was revealed that he had been present at the scene. However, in a surprising turn of events, Lewis was never convicted of the murders. In exchange for his testimony against his 2 friends, who were allegedly involved in the stabbings, the charges against Lewis were dropped. He pled guilty to obstruction of justice, admitting that he had lied to police in the early stages of the investigation. For his part in the brawl, Lewis was sentenced to a year of probation, but he avoided any jail time. The legal resolution to the case left many questions unanswered, and the public was left divided. Some believed that Lewis had escaped true justice, while others thought that his role in the brawl had been exaggerated. Now, even though he was acquitted of the murder charges, the case remained controversial throughout his career. Fans questioned whether Lewis had truly been an innocent bystander or if he had somehow been involved in the stabbings and had been given a lighter sentence due to his fame. The fact that charges were dropped after Lewis testified against his entourage is, in fact, questionable. Nevertheless, Lewis's career continued to thrive. He went on to win another Super Bowl with the Ravens in 2012, capping off his career with an emotional victory and becoming one of the greatest linebackers in NFL history. But the shadow of the 2000 incident will always follow him around, even with all his success. Many fans still remember the legal drama surrounding the fight and the question of whether Lewis was truly innocent or whether he used his fame and money to avoid consequences. But nothing could compare to the shocking downfall of Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez, a star with a dark legacy. Aaron Hernandez was once one of the NFL's brightest young stars, known for his impressive skills on the field and a lucrative contract with the New England Patriots. After being drafted in 2010, Hernandez quickly earned a reputation as one of the best tight ends in the game. His athleticism, ability to catch passes in tight spaces, and blocking skills made him an essential player for the Patriots' offense. With a 5-year, $41 million contract, Hernandez seemed to have everything any young athlete could want. However, his promising career would be marred by tragedy and violence. In 2013, Hernandez was convicted of the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player who was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée. Lloyd's body was found in an industrial park near Hernandez's home in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. Investigators discovered that Hernandez, along with 2 accomplices, had killed Lloyd in a fit of rage. Hernandez was arrested, and in 2015, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The investigation revealed that Hernandez had been involved in the planning and execution of the murder, and that he had orchestrated it with 2 accomplices, Carlos Ortiz and Ernest Wallace. The motive for the murder was believed to be tied to a dispute between Hernandez and Lloyd, although the exact reason for the conflict remains unclear. During the trial, it was suggested that Lloyd may have been killed because he knew too much about Hernandez's involvement in other criminal activities. In the years following Hernandez's conviction, further investigations revealed that he was linked to a 2012 double homicide in Boston. In that case, Daniel De Abreu and Safira Furtado were killed in a drive-by shooting. Evidence showed that Hernandez had been involved in the incident, and in 2017 he was indicted for their murders as well. However, before his trial for the double homicide could take place, Hernandez tragically took his own life in his prison cell on April 19, 2017, at the age of 27. Hernandez's death raised even more questions about his life and mental health. After his passing, his brain was studied by researchers at Boston University who found that he too had severe stage 3 CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. CTE has been linked to mood swings, memory loss, aggression, and violent behavior. Hernandez's case was particularly alarming because CTE is often found in older athletes who have played for many years, but Hernandez had developed the condition at a young age. Experts suggested that the damage from repeated concussions could have played a role in his erratic behavior, including the murders he committed. If you enjoyed watching this video and would love to keep exploring more exciting videos like this, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen.